learn. Okay? The other thing that it helps if you know is how they curtsied and how they bowed, because it changed. In the 18th century, a gentleman, when he bowed, he would step back and he would acknowledge the lady. And if she was curtsying, he probably had her by the hand, help her with support. The lady went straight down, okay? No leaning forward. You have to remember the clothes they were wearing. And the ladies' clothes were like this. If they leaned forward, they would get embarrassed, okay? So ladies, when they curtsied, went straight down from shoulder to hip. They went straight down. I don't have any knees, so I can't show you that. They went down fairly low if their legs were all right. Older ladies tended not to do as deep a curtsy as younger ladies did. Older ladies very often just did a step back and acknowledge with a slightly bent knee. Younger ladies in the days of hip hoops did a very deep plie. Do you know what a plie is? Yeah. It's a ballet term for you when you have your feet out and you do a very deep knee bend. But the knees are pointing out right under the hip hoops so they didn't show. So it looked very graceful and effortless, and what it was a squat. Okay? Now, once the clothing changed during the Empire period, the Napoleonic era, which started somewhere in the neighborhood of 1795 to 1820, ladies went from wearing 40 pounds of clothes to wearing 14 ounces of clothes. They wore very sheer, very narrow dresses that were kind of classical Greek or Roman style. And they didn't weigh anything. There was no place for the knees to go. You couldn't do a plie anymore. That's when the curtsy that we see now being done by professional dancers and actors and actresses came into vogue, because they had to do a curtsy that looked elegant even though the clothing was very narrow. Okay? The other thing is dances used to be long and narrow because the rooms were long and narrow. When the rooms got square, the dancing got square too. Okay? In the following years, after the turn of the century, you would find many more quadrilles and many more cotillions, at least for the first 20 years, than contras, simply because they could do it then. The clothing didn't weigh them down, and they could do much more leaping about, a lot more very active things. And that's when the waltz rhythm really began to take hold. So 18th century, contras, cotillions like the one you saw, minuet. 19th century, quadrilles, cotillions, some contras. Petronella was written in 1817. And we all know how to do Petronella, but it was always done then as a proper duple, only the active couples doing the Petronella pattern. Okay? And it was done really in a very, very sprightly tempo. I think even faster than we do it today, because of the change in clothing and so on. They could, and people tend to do what they can do. Okay. Then after 1820, the waltz and the polka became the most important rhythms, even in the ballroom where people went for an evening of dancing. You would do contras, yes. You would do quadrilles, yes. But between each of those things would be a waltz or a polka, and sometimes they would dance for 4 hours, and every other dance would be a waltz or a polka. And the further into the century we get, the more important those things became. So we have circle waltzes, and we have quadrille waltzes, We have a Scottish influence around the middle of the century, around the Civil War times. Anything Scottish you did was very fashionable, starting along about 1850 or so, and going throughout the Civil War era. Stephen Foster music was a rage, both here and on the continent, and dancing was done to it. As a matter of fact, he wrote a good many of his pieces for dancing. So it is entirely appropriate to have an old folks at home quadrille, or to have a quadrille that uses some other Stephen Foster piece of music. When we get towards the end of the 19th century, the dancing became much more sedate. Starting in about the 1880s, the quadrilles were almost a march tempo, a lot of them, and contras were falling into disuse. They still danced the Virginia Reel and Petronella, Money Musk, and one or two others. Here in this country, I'm talking about. Then something called the Sousa two-step came in. And the Washington Post March is perfect for that, by the way. It works very well, and basically it's a walk, two forward, two-step, more or less. And you can vary the direction in which you do that, but by and large, that's basic footwork for it. After the turn of the 20th century, most of this kind of dancing gradually disappeared from social ballrooms because it was replaced with all of the wonderful things that came along in the way of couple dancing. So what we're talking about basically is 200 years. You've had 200 years worth of dancing in the last few minutes, okay? Now, what do you need to know? In the 19th century, the curtsies were done very much the way they were during the Revolutionary War. Why? Because the women were in big hoops again. Squares were bigger than they are today because people couldn't get as close to each other as we can today. With all that skirt, you can get that close. That's one of the reasons, by the way, why contras were not done as much, because the clothing made it awkward. You had to spread the line way out so the people were not standing real close to each other. So that's why those things happened the way they did, because what's happening in the world, what's happening in clothing, and what's happening in architecture, all of those things influence the dancing of the time. When we had the westward expansion, what happened was that they took the dances with them, but they didn't have dancing masters going in covered wagons. So whoever had the loudest voice tried to remember the dances and bellowed them out to people. And we really think that that's probably the way the square dance caller really started. The first mention of square dance, or not square dance callers, but they called it dancing masters, but they really weren't, is in some books that we have found from the 1880s, late 1880s. And from then on, you can find, gradually, you'll see the term caller appear more often after the turn of the century. So that's the history lesson, and that's all the history lesson that I'm going to give you. I will answer any questions, but there are a couple of other things that I want to point out to you. An essential for dancing, for period dancing, is a fan for the ladies. In the 18th century, before 1850, the men also carried fans. Some of them did. Not all, but some. The men's fans tended not to be quite this large and elaborate, but they carried what was called chicken skin fans in their coat pocket. And it's no wonder, because the clothing was very heavy and they got very hot. And so that was their air conditioning, okay? But when you do a ball, if the ladies come up and ask you about accessories and things, a fan was a necessity. Everybody had a fan, okay? This one is an 18th century style fan with a painted leaf and some trim on it. It's a reproduction. Feather fans were very much in vogue, probably not before 1795, but in the Empire period we see more and more illustrations of feather fans, and from then on forward, even up till now, you can find feather fans. Okay? Bamboo fans or carved fans came into vogue towards the later part of the 19th century. And so now all of you ladies remember this stuff so that your partner doesn't have to. Okay, about the fans. And this would have been carried after about 1890. And then this one here is a 20th century fan. There is no way that you can carry this and make anybody think it came from the 18th century. It isn't intended to even look like one. That is embroidered nylon, and it's definitely a 20th century product. So if some lady comes up and asks you what kind of fan to buy, and she's dressed in a Renaissance outfit, for Pete's sake, don't tell her to buy one of these. Okay? All right. Now then, I could go into a lot more detail about historical dancing, but all of you have dances at your fingertips that are historical. Jefferson's Reel, that comes from 1772, I think. Money Musk is a very old dance. We have other things that are, the Young Widow is an old dance. It goes back to the 1770s. There are many dances that we have. I have a whole book of them up here. They're ordinary contra dances. They are duples and triples. The one thing you will not find is an improper duple or triple. They are very, very rare before, about 1840. So for anything 18th century or Empire period, don't use anything that has a crossed over feature in the contra.
Quickly get a group of people up and show them proper improper.
Okay, sure. Can we have some couples?
That takes care of that.
I know, but she's just going to show what she's talking about.
Okay. I tend to forget sometimes that we have other than contra folks in here. Okay. I would like to start at the head of the set, and the first two couples join hands in a circle of four. The next two couples do the same. And we have a couple down there with nobody to dance with right now. Well, we've got one. Okay. All right. This is a proper duple. Okay? Duple means double or two. You've got two couples dancing together. That's a proper duple. Okay? Now then, I would like the couple closest to the music in each foursome to trade places with their partner. That makes it improper. Why is it improper? Because we have men in the ladies' line, and that's a no-no in the 18th century. Okay? All right, get back to where you were originally. Now I would like the first three couples to join hands in a circle of six, and the next three. This is a proper triple. Why is it triple? Because three couples. Okay? Now the first couple in each of those groups trade places. And this is an improper triple. And again, that's a no-no in the 18th century. Okay? Get back to where you were. Most progressions in the 18th century are something I don't go into when I do a historical dance because we don't have time. The 20th century has a problem they didn't have then. And when they went to the dance, it would start at 9 o'clock maybe. They would go till midnight, have supper, and dance till dawn. So therefore, you could take a lot more time to do anything. And what would happen is the number one couple would dance with the number two couple. And then the number one couple would go on and dance with the number three couple. And then the number one couple would go on and dance with the number four couple ad infinitum. And the number one lady, generally in the 18th century, was somebody who was honored, a prominent person, and she is the one who would decide what dance they were going to do. She would consult with the dancing master, and she would announce, we are going to do Jefferson's Reel. And then she and her partner would be the first active couple, and they'd dance all the way down to the end of the cotton picking set, okay? Before anybody else started. Well, we don't have time to do that, which is why we have every other couple active all together, okay? Now then, a dance like Jefferson's Reel is a very easy dance to do either with children or adults. Give me Fisher's hornpipe. Join hands in a circle of four. You don't have to do much teaching for this. Circle left. Circle right. Right hand's across. Left hand's back. Active couples go down the outside of your own line. Turn around, come back. Actives get into the middle, squeeze in between them, take them along, go down in fours. Now back up. Arch in the middle, pull the ends through. You're facing a new two. Okay, that's it. Hold it there. Okay. And many of the dances from then are just that easy to do. The only difference is the clothing and the fact that you call the people ladies and gentlemen, and you make sure at the end of the dance you say, take your lady over and sit her down, or thank your lady and take a break, or whatever. You be careful about the kind of American idiosyncrasies that you let creep into the language. And basically that's it. Keep the attitude that you respect the dances that you're teaching people and the time period, and they will love you forever. Thank you.
That's what I struck. Okay.